because the cloud always gets so full. Well, welcome everybody. We are going to give it another minute to let folks get settled in the room, but feel free to engage with us via the chat before we get started. And right about 7:01, we're going to have a word from our Spanish interpreters for our Spanish-speaking guest, so that they know how to get the information in Spanish, and they'll also be pasting that in the chat box. So we'll do that right around 7:01. Okay, it's 7:01, so we will have a word from our Spanish interpreters real quick.
Yes, good evening to everybody. My name is Angelina and I'm here with Flor, and together we'll be providing interpreting into Spanish. So just bear with me for one moment while I make this announcement in Spanish for folks. Hola, bienvenidos a todos. Espero que estén teniendo una linda noche. Estaremos ofreciendo servicios de interpretación al español. Entonces, si ustedes prefieren escuchar en español, sencillamente elijan el canal de español en su computador. Usted verá un símbolo redondo de un mundo que puede presionar y luego irse a español. Si estás en un teléfono inteligente o una tableta, esta opción está ubicada abajo, a mano derecha del teléfono, donde están las opciones de Zoom. Usted tiene que irse hasta la parte derecha, que hay 3 puntitos, donde dice más, y luego se va a ir a interpretación, luego pone español y luego pone finalizar. Y con eso podrá escuchar en español. Estaremos poniendo las instrucciones también en el chat para que lo tengan como referencia. Cualquier pregunta, por favor, nos dejan saber y espero que disfruten mucho la sesión de hoy. Thanks, Amy. I have made the announcement and I did also put it in the chat. However, I think you need to share it with everybody else because I only have access to share it with the panelists. So if you can share that with folks, that'll be wonderful. And I hope we have a great session. Thank you.
Thanks, Angie. And thank you, Terry. Looks like Terry has put that in the chat. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. I'm super excited about this webinar. This is a topic that I've always wanted to learn more about. I know some about, but now I'm really excited to get all the nitty-gritty, the good information so that we can share it out with families. My name is Amy Combs, and I am the Executive Director here at ECAC, and I'm super excited about the folks I'm joined by tonight. Such as my colleague, Terry Layton. She's going to go ahead and introduce herself.
Hi there, I am Terry Layton. Thank you for joining us today. I am one of the staff members here at ECAC, and I'm leading a project in collaboration with the Department of Public Instruction. So I'm really excited to have Matthew here with us today, and I'm going to let him go ahead and introduce himself. Or actually, I think Amy is going to do the initial introduction of Matthew.
I'm going to do a little introduction, but I'm really going to get out of the way and let him do his thing. But we are really excited to be joined by Matthew Martinez tonight. Matthew works for the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction Office of Exceptional Children. That's a mouthful. And he serves as the consultant for significant cognitive disabilities. And I had heard about Matthew a time or two, some from colleagues that had been in a space with him, and also for my daughter, who actually is a special education teacher. She teaches the extended content standards to elementary age students, and heard wonderful things about him. And I was like, we got to get him in the lineup. So we were really excited when he said yes to this. So I'm here to learn. So I can't wait to hear about it. So I'm going to get out of the way, and then Matthew, give you the floor and let you do your thing. Oh, and real quick, I did forget one thing. Sorry, Matthew. We're going to try and use the Q&A for questions and the chat for back and forth engagement. Certainly sometimes questions end up in the chat, and that's okay too. We do know that some folks submitted questions ahead of time with their registration. Not all of them apply to this topic. So if you had a specific question and it doesn't get answered tonight, please feel free to reach out to us at ECAC. That's what our parent educators can help with. If there's something that didn't really apply to the content tonight, and you had a question about your child's services or IEP or processes, systems, things of that nature, please feel free to reach out to us. So now I'll get out of the way and let Matthew do his thing.
Oh, well, thank you, Amy. That's very kind of your daughter. And thank you for being here, Amy and Terry, and all of our interpreters for making this session accessible. But most importantly, I just want to thank you for being here. I know you lead very busy lives, and I just appreciate you. I'm humbled that you're willing to take time to come and listen to my presentation. So I'm going to share my screen real quick, and we'll get into it. As Amy said, if you have any questions or comments or anything, throw them in the chat. I do have another monitor, so if it, no, I don't want to share it. I do have another monitor. So if I'm looking this way, it's just I'm looking at that other monitor for the chat. So a little bit about myself is I was a classroom teacher for almost 18 years. I taught high school, I taught middle, and I taught elementary, and I loved them all. People always say, oh, what was your favorite? I loved each one for different reasons, right? I taught K through 2, and I felt that was very rewarding because I got to watch kids grow, you know, that 5 to 9 ages. I mean, we'd have kids come in just teeny tiny and then leave me like my size. I loved high school just for the transition piece, helping kids hopefully have enough skills to find employment. And you know, I worked in Ohio for a while, and we lived right off the bus line, so we'd take our kids all over the city of Dayton. And so it was just great to watch society's interaction with our students. And then middle school, I only lasted a year because that was tough, but it was fun. It was fun in its own right, just watching kids grow and kids trying to figure out who they were. And I found if I could be a great advocate, a lot of my students were more accepted in school. And that was many, many moons ago, where social media didn't exist. And so just by word of mouth, you had to hear how great kids were. So that's a little bit about me. I applied for this job, and my boss, Dreama McCoy, she said, you're hired. And I said, and I got there, and I'm surrounded by PhDs, and I have my master's, but you know, by PhDs and these high-level thinkers. And I said, Dreama, why did you pick me? And she said, Matthew, I can tell you always think of students and teachers first. And that to me is very rewarding, because not everybody does once you become so far removed. So I came to this presentation thinking of your child and the questions that you might like answered or need answered, along with, hey, how can I help my students? And how can I help maybe the classroom teacher see the importance of teaching academics, as well as making sure my child's social and emotional needs are met as well. So that's where this presentation is going to go. We are going to have a Q&A session. I'm going to provide it, and it's going to require you using the chat. And it's just meant for knowledge. It's not meant for anything like, oh, I can't believe you didn't know that. So I just want you guys to know this is a safe space. So as I go through this presentation, I just asked for some reflections. And I read this wonderful book about reading called Shifting the Balance, because I believe all students can learn to read. And these really struck me. And the first one is be kind to yourselves. I often hear from teachers and admin who just beat themselves up. And even I beat myself up when I learn about new teaching strategies that weren't even around when I was there. I was like, oh, I should have done this. So just be kind to yourselves, and always actively work to lower your defenses, so you can raise your awareness. And we're going to get into that right off the bat. And then the last bullet is take action rather than giving into the paralysis of self-doubt and or the feeling of being overwhelmed. I know that your life is complicated, and I know it's really easy for me to sit in this chair and say that. But as an educator for this is my 24th year, I think the last one is key, is people tend to want to change, but they don't know where to start, so they don't. So hopefully throughout this presentation, you'll see some things. One thing that you can glean away and like, you know what, I'm going to try that. Here's what we're going to cover tonight. We're going to cover belief systems. We're going to talk about the federal law that guides everything that we do. We're going to talk about the process in ECATS, and ECATS is our IEP system for the entire state of North Carolina. We're going to talk about the extended content standards and what they are and why they were created, along with resources. And then we're going to talk about the assessment piece. Every child is mandated to be assessed in North Carolina. And I love that. Every means every, and we'll talk about that as well. So let's just get into the presentation. And this is where I always start with every presentation I give, is talking about belief systems. And I go about every presentation with the least dangerous assumption. And the least dangerous assumption is this: the criterion of the least dangerous assumption holds that in the absence of conclusive data, educational decisions ought to be based on assumptions that, if incorrect, will have the least dangerous effect on the likelihood that students will be able to function independently as adults. I would change that wording to as independently as possible, because some of our students we know, will always have mobility issues and might need their diapers changed or need assistance feeding. So there might always be a dependency there, but we're also looking for the independence in terms of communication and being able to have your thoughts come out of your brain, out of your body in some way for our students who are non-speaking. But what this quote kind of says to me is, like, think the best. Like, what's the harm in thinking that your child is able to do things? And I know it's like, well, yeah, man, of course I think that, right? However, that gets us to our next thing is, are the words reflective of the belief that all children can learn, and that are we sure we're making the best decision for our child right now? And there is a wonderful free website out there called the TIE Center. And I will throw this into the chat because I really like this website, because it talks about the least dangerous assumption, and it talks about it in very free and open terms, along with federal law about IDEA. But it also has a story about Rosie. And I will show you Rosie. We won't watch the video just for the sake of time. But here's Rosie, and it talks about her day, and it talks about an environment that's great for Rosie, because everyone believes that Rosie can learn and be independent. And then it has an activity afterwards. And I really would like to do this activity with you guys right now. If I can get out of, I'm going to stop sharing so I can see my screen, because there's all these bars here. And then I'm coming back. Share screen. All right. Thank you for your patience in that. All right. And so throughout Rosie's brief, it talks about the power of assumptions. In education, well, let's just talk about the word assumption. I went to Google, looked it up, and it's a thing that is accepted as true without proof. However, in education, it gets a little bit tricky. I am not a school psychologist. I cannot say I'm well-versed in the land of school psychology, but would anyone venture a guess about what is something that is proof that you hear a lot about your child in terms of an evaluation point of view? And if anybody wants to answer that in the chat. So what is an evaluation point, like number, that you hear educators often say about your child? I'll give it a pause, see if anybody's putting it in the chat. Yeah, there's someone said, I hear that my daughter doesn't respond. Okay. Let me reframe the question just a little bit. Is yeah, he can't or won't. However, she has delayed response function. Right? What's an evaluation measure that you often hear about from your school psychologist? How about that question? There we go. IQ, right? We hear about the intelligent quotient quite a bit. And this is where the least dangerous assumption really rings to me, because oftentimes, and like I said, I'm not a school psychologist. However, an IQ is one data point. But it is proof, right? That there is some proof in that pudding because it's done through a validated measure. However, where it gets really tricky is when assumptions are based on that. And that's where two sentences can really affect the outcome of a child. And let's talk about this sentence here, right? Shaquan has Down syndrome, so I think this classroom may be best. He will learn the functional skills he'll need to get a job. So in the essence of assumptions, and in the chat, if you don't mind replying, what are some assumptions that can be made about Shaquan, do you think? Or what assumptions are being made about Shaquan in these just two sentences? So I'll pause. All right. I see limitations, his classroom setting, that they're coming in quick, good. That he can't keep up with the standard curriculum. Someone assumed he won't go on to post-secondary education. Someone said, I think. Never had that one. That's a very good assumption. Well done. Assuming Down syndrome affects his ability to be in a typical class, that he will need to get a job rather than go to college. Yep, Katie, he cannot learn academics. Assuming no academic skills and giving only life skills. Yep, he can only get a job, can only learn functional skills, and they are assuming that he will not extend his educational journey. These are some really good ones. Yeah. Because of Down syndrome, he learns a certain way. Yeah, that's a great quote. All right. So those are all very good responses to a very tricky question, right? What assumptions are being made? So as you can see, like two sentences have kind of outlined Shaquan's future. And that's where your job as an advocate and a parent. And I understand emotions often run high, but in order to change these assumptions, you often have to come at it from a logical point of view with emotion intertwined. And to that, I mean, you have to have a good response when you hear someone put limitations such as this person is done on Shaquan. And so the next slide talks about the assumptions being made. And this is taken straight from that website I just showed you. All people with Down syndrome have the same needs, right? That's an assumption. And functional skills are defined as daily living skills and typically include hygiene skills, making change, and following basic directions. Academic skills such as reading, writing, science, and math are not considered a priority or achievable for some students. How sad is that? Like every student can fly. And so oftentimes people need a nice response, because I don't think this was done with any ill will. I'm not sure someone was saying, you know what, I got into education, I'm going to hold my students back, right? I want to sincerely believe that that's not true. But as an advocate for your child, I also have to think, okay, how can I respond to somebody with that mindset? How can I change their mind? And that's the importance of this exercise is, you know what, we have to respond to these assumptions, because that is not taking the least dangerous assumption. That's taking the most dangerous assumption, right? Is assuming Shaquan can't learn. And so a nice response would be, you know, Down syndrome is only one part of who Shaquan is. You know, none of our children, none of our students should ever be considered their diagnosis. It's definitely part of who they are, but it's not who they are. And then functional skills. I love having conversations around functional skills, because I'm going to ask in the chat, if you can respond in the chat, what's one functional skill that you did today? Broad question. What's one functional skill? Someone made dinner, laundry, they got dressed, went to the grocery, showered, Decided on lunch. Yep. Logged. Oh, that's a good one. Logged on to join this webinar. Definitely a functional. Someone said reading a book, put on my seatbelt, made it to a doctor. Good. All right. Drove a car, joined video. Anybody buy anything today? Yeah. Wrote several emails and progress notes. Yes. Someone made their coffee. I think that's, yes, online shopping. I bought boxing gloves. Uh-oh, hopefully not for me, Deandra. Right. So people often think like, oh, I need to teach money, right? Did you buy those boxing gloves from Amazon? Because if you did, you didn't really use money. You use this abstract number that's floating around in your bank account. So if you ever hear functional skills, there's a wide variety of functional skills here, right? You read, you did math, you were on your phone, right? But yet, like, how often is this technology being taught? So that's where I love this response is functional skills for Shaquan or what? Or reading, like being literate. Like literacy is the key. If you can read, write, and communicate, like you can go a long way. And that's mastery of 26 letters of our alphabet. Making friends is a functional skill for Shaquan, right? And learning how to advocate for himself. Let's see, that just sounds great. My daughter with Down syndrome is a master at Googling on her phone. Well, that's awesome. I think the advocacy piece is really big. And here's why. And this is spoken from personal experience of having to contact our school counselor and get CPS, child protective services involved, is the abuse rates for students with significant disabilities is a much higher rate. So the ability to communicate and advocate for themselves that something isn't right happening is huge. All right, my son does with cooking channels on iPad, though he has cerebral palsy. Wonderful. Yeah, there is a great young man with Down syndrome who has a cooking TikTok. And I won't say everything he says, but at the beginning of every one, he says, you got to wash your DAMN hands, which I find is great because if you've been to high school, you know that's like, oh, that's one of the more mild things that people say. But lastly is how can we support Shaquan learning all the skills he needs to help him get access to general education classroom and content? And here's where things get tricky is, does anyone know the true purpose of special education? Like, what's the end goal in special education? So I'll ask that question for the chat. What's the end goal of special education? Okay, thank you for your honesty. I don't know. Life skills, advocacy. I would hope that is to help each child reach their highest potential, to keep kids who learn slower from distracting typical learners, to prepare the student for further employment, be a functional adult, to educate to their highest potential. All of these are wonderful answers, but what I'm going to say might shock you is the purpose of special education is for students to get out of special education, right? It's to fill those gaps and those holes in their learning so they become general education students, right? That's the overall goal. And people forget about that. Like my job is to work myself out of a job, right? Which is crazy to think about, but that's the type of expectations that should be out there. Can I get that in writing? Well, you can say that Matthew Martinez from DPI. I don't flash my DPI too often because oftentimes I've noticed it kind of makes people feel a little weird, but you know, that's the purpose of special ed, is to fill those gaps. All right, so let's do this one together. All right. Charles has autism. He doesn't have the social skills to make it in the world. Right. So this is another two-sentence statement. What are some assumptions that are made within this not ill-intended person, but the statement that somebody said? That he's lacking social skills. His social skills are insufficient. Making it is not defined. It's very pessimistic. That the world is ableist. that the world is as ableist as the speaker. Yeah. All that autistic children lack social skills, right? The neurotypical adjust have what it takes to interact with the world. Social skills determine success. Already assumed he cannot learn social skills, limiting opportunities. He's not understood by others, including adults. Yeah, and yeah, a very fixed mindset. For me, the first 3 words, Charles has autism, um, doesn't really tell you much about Charles other than a diagnosis. And the autism world does say you met one child with autism means you've met one child with autism. But the question I have is, when's the last time someone said autism is amazing, it's awesome, right? Unfortunately, not as many people that they should. And so that these first 3 words makes me think like, oh, maybe this person doesn't understand autism, and understand just how wonderful it can be. Although, oftentimes there's challenges, of course, as with anyone. But I read that in kind of a negative connotation, right? So thinking about that, yeah, there are a lot of people out there without the diagnosis that don't have the social skills. So in doing this activity, like, what is a response you could say to somebody who says that, right? And I think if we reverse a lot of what was said in the chat, there's our answer, right? Autism is just one part of who he is. Like, tell me more about his autism, right? Tell me what you know, right? How are you going to teach him the social skills? There's wonderful evidence-based practices to help teach those. So those are some responses. So now comes the hard part. And this is going to be just checking my time. I'm going to be quiet for for 2 minutes and just have you do this activity. And this isn't meant for anything other than yourself, right? And write a statement that you've heard, or maybe the statement that you've accidentally said about your child, and think a 2-sentence statement, and think about the assumptions that were made and what's the response you could say. Like, if it sounds like not everyone has had the best school experience, which saddens my heart, but maybe it's something that you can help to change that mindset of the people working with your child. Or hopefully you've had an awesome one, and then maybe to further continue that career. So I'm gonna be quiet. I'm gonna set a timer for 90 seconds, I hope. And then we'll keep going. Hopefully you can multitask. I can't be quiet for 90 seconds. Someone just wrote in the chat, I had an SLP tell me my son was a hard worker. I agree, and I make a point to share that when I can. And that's wonderful that the SLP said that. Ask them to operationally define hard worker next time. And it's kind of like good job. Good job is pointless, people. Like, good job at, and like be very specific. So the child's like, oh yeah, like I could just say, hey, good job. But if I say good job writing in the chat, that further encourages that. Yeah, and Katie, I can tell you a story. So the comment in the chat is, it's a teacher here, and when talking about inclusive education, the general educator said, I just don't know what he or she will get out of it. I like to tell a story as I taught K through 2, K through 3 at times. And I had a first grade teacher just have a bad day, and she came to my class and she's like, what are you even doing here? I said, well, why don't you come in and find out, because her class is right next to mine. And I had some pretty rambunctious students, not trying to take any gender stereotypes into account, but me being a male in education, I often got some students who had violent tendencies at times. And so I had this one student, I'll just call her Kay, and I was like, hey, why don't you take Kay in your class and see what's happened? Oh, I don't think I can do that. Well, I said, well, you have a field trip coming up. Can she come on your field trip? And she's like, oh, only if you send your assistant. And at the time, I only had one assistant. And I had a full class. I had 10 students. So I said, okay, you can have my assistant and take Kay. So they came back and she's like, oh my gosh, Kay has so many skills. She did great things. And I said, well, that's what we do in here. We make sure our students have those great things. So I'm sorry that sometimes people can be persnickety. I call them old and crotchety, and that could be like a 22-year-old, or it could be like a 70-year-old. So the trick is changing those hearts and minds. All right, so thank you. That's been, let me turn off that. All right, so now I'm going to ask you guys a series of questions, and please feel free, like this is a safe place, and they're multiple choice, and I'm going to talk about each one. So if you don't know, that's okay, right? That's why you're here to learn today. And this is my job, so I kind of have to know this stuff. So there's no code needed, and I often give prizes, but Kahoot doesn't really work that well. So in the chat, if you can put your answer, and I'll have like a 10-second delay for you to put your answer in. So the first question, as we go in, there's 10 questions. What is the most current law regarding students with significant cognitive disabilities? A, there isn't one. B is PL 94-142. C is No Child Left Behind. Or D is Every Student Succeeds Act. All right, got a couple answers coming in the chat. All right, I'm seeing, it looks like we're kind of split between A and D. The correct answer is D, as in dog, the Every Student Succeeds Act. And that's where students with significant cognitive disabilities are directly addressed within the law. There is one, so A is kind of my misnomer. B, PL 94-142, that is what is now IDEA. And that was enacted in the year 1974. And I like to say that year because civil rights movement was 1955. So if you look at a group of students who were, I don't want to say ostracized because that's not the right word, but a student population who was kind of neglected, it was students with special needs, right? Because we've only been in school for 50 years or so, which is crazy. And oftentimes they were in closets when we first started. Like I did classroom observations with students in closets, and I've got gray, but I don't have that much gray. So the question is, where can the Every Student Succeeds Act be found? Just search for it in Google, do a Google search, and you can find it. There's some great parents information out there. I think if you put parent information about Every Student Succeeds Act, you should be able to find some good stuff. And then if you further narrow that search down, it could be significant cognitive disabilities. All right, the next question is, who makes the decision to place a student on the extended content standards? And if you don't know what those are, we'll get to them, no worries. All right, the D's are flooding in. That's right. It is the IEP team. And the IEP team can have disagreements. And if there's a disagreement, then the LEA helps make that decision. However, here's the thing. Oh, well, there's the next question. Hold on. So you are correct. Well, Deandra, actually, parents are active members of the IEP team. If you're not having that experience, then you definitely want to talk to your school principal or even your EC director about that, because parents are most definitely part of the IEP team. Okay, Here comes my next question. Who has the power to override the IEP decision? School administration, central office, me, or D, none of the above? You guys are correct. No one is able to override an IEP team decision. It's against the law. It is an IEP team decision. DPI cannot come in and say you made a bad decision. Central office cannot. The school administration, they cannot say, you know what, no, we're not doing this. It's an IEP team decision. All right. So I probably should have put this one first. North Carolina has alternate academic achievement standards. What is the name of those standards in North Carolina? All right. You guys are correct. Those alternate academic achievement standards are in North Carolina called the extended content standards. Different states have different names, but here in North Carolina, they are the extended content standards. Next question, is it true or false? Once a student is placed on the extended content standards, the student must always be on the extended content standards. Is that a true statement or is that a false statement? Good. Yep. It is false. This decision must be made at every annual review. And that's going based on data, based on evaluation results. It's got to be looked at every year because this is a annual review decision. All right, so what is the name of the assessment for students with significant cognitive disabilities? Is it the A, NC Extend 2, B, EOC, D, Extend 1, or D, the CCRAA? All right, looks like, yeah, everyone's getting it. It is the North Carolina Extend 1. And this is given in grades 3 through 8, 10, and grade 11. 3 through 8 and grade 10 is given the last 10 days of the school year. Grade 11 is the alternate to the ACT. It's a shortened version. So there's I believe there's 12 to 15 questions. I'm not allowed to see the assessment because I'm on the instructional side. So they think I'll go give everyone the answers, which I won't. So we're talking about the Every Student Succeeds Act now. And so determined by law, what percentage of the assessed population should be eligible to take the NC Extend 1? And I get this question, and I do have an answer for it, but it says, if we just make a certain percentage to be considered significant, are we reducing our students and just making them into a number? And there was a lot of conversation when this law became active, and the answer is 1% D. But it's meant for students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. And what we found is that wasn't always happening. And so that law tried to address the idea that these teams were placing students on alternate standards to boost their test scores, because that kind of started with No Child Left Behind. But so the Every Student Disease Act, called ESSA as well, tried to limit that, what was happening. So in your IEP team meeting, you'll have a guidance flow chart, or you should have a guidance flow chart. And the question is, and if you don't know what that is, we can show you as well. The NCDPI guidance flow chart is policy, meaning you have to follow that flow chart to a T. True or false? And if you've never heard of it, we'll get to it. That's right, it is false. The key word is guidance. All right, and hopefully reading through your questions, these answered some of those questions that were sent already in. What is the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction IQ cut score for placing a student on the extended content standards? A, there isn't one. B, 40, C, 60, or D, 55? Okay, seeing kind of a wide variety of answers. There's a question, what grade should a child have their IQ score? And I'll get to that question, so I have no worries. We do not have an IQ cut score saying if you have an IQ of 56, you have to go to standard course of study. If you have an IQ of 55, the extended content standards course of study is appropriate for your child. Other states have done that. But as long as I'm in this position, I will advocate for that not to happen, because I believe IQ score is just one piece of the puzzle, not the only piece of the puzzle. And my analysis or my report to that is, well, I don't even know my own IQ. So I don't know the last time someone said, you know what, I have an IQ of blah, blah, blah. Like, so while it's a valid measured instrument given by a school psychologist or an outside provider, I don't think it's the only piece of a complex puzzle. All right, which area of eligibility automatically qualifies a student to be eligible for the extended content standards? All right. Yeah, we're flowing now. D, there is not one. And so this is where the law in true federal way is somewhat vague, right? It does not specifically define what a student with a significant cognitive disability is. That was left for the states to decide. And most states kind of took a three-prong approach. Significant deficits in cognitive and adaptive behavior skills, needing modification and accommodations as part of their curriculum, and repeated and intensive instruction. That's kind of what most states do, and that's North Carolina is similar. A student, so here comes our, I think we have a couple more questions. A student being instructed towards the ECS must be in a separate room when receiving any instruction. True or false? All right, I see. Yep, it's false, right? When we talk about the ECS, you have to hopefully have a certified teacher in what's called adapted curriculum. And that instruction can be given away from their non-disabled peers. So that means like a student could be in the back of the room receiving instruction, you know, in the back of a room, as long as they're away from their non-disabled peers. That's still instruction away from their non-disabled peers. For some reason, the interpretation of that has come in, oh, they need their own separate room. Like, no, it just kind of happens that way sometimes, but it's just time away from non-disabled peers. All right, so here comes the major implication of having a student take the Extend 1 in high school and learn from the extended content standards. What does a student receive upon graduation if they've taken the ECS throughout high school? All right, everyone knows that one. Yeah, a certificate of completion. And that certificate of completion is it's a big deal, right? Because it's not a high school diploma. And if you look at a lot of the job requirements for places of competitive employment, it does require a high school diploma. So that's why the IEP's team decision of making this is extremely important. But once again, it has to be revisited each and every year using most current and relevant data. So awesome. Thank you guys for playing along that little game. Usually I have prizes, but today I will just say thank you for being here. You are actually my prize. And so I have to unshare because I can't seem to see the top of my screen. So let me get back. Share screen. All right, thank you for your patience. We are back. All right, here's what we know about our students with significant cognitive disabilities, and what we know about, in my opinion, all of our students, but specifically students with significant cognitive disabilities, is the first bullet. All of our students can learn. And that's what we have to do and believe that. We also need educators who believe they can learn, right? Very, very multi-pronged approach here. We need educators who are experts in standard aligned learning. And for our extended content standards teachers, that gets a little tricky because When you're certified in the extended content standards called the adapted curriculum license, you're certified in all core subject areas, meaning English, ELA, math, science, and social studies, which is a big lift. Our students oftentimes need more time, more practice, and need opportunities. And then all of our students need a reliable means of communication. We see that a lot. We have, according to our NC Extend 1 data, we have about 38 to 40% of our students with autism as a primary area on towards the extended content standards. And that's, you know, as we know, that is a, it does have social disorder with it. And so that reliable means of communication is key. And oftentimes our students need assistive technology. And correct me if I'm wrong, Amy, you guys had Josh here doing the assistive technology, right? All right.
Sure did. Yes, we had a really good presentation with him on assistive technology.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, Joshua Barton is our state contact. So please contact him with any and all questions related to assistive technology. And he's been a great resource. And here's one thing I'm going to drop into the chat for you guys, because I believe that this should be posted in every classroom. And this is called the Communication Bill of Rights. And, you know, here in the United States, well, I was fortunate to move my student teaching abroad in England, but, you know, us, you know, people in the United States love their freedoms, right? And we also love our Bill of Rights, which we hang our hat on. But what I love about this document, the Communication Bill of Rights, it talks about all the rights that people with severe disabilities have in terms of communication. And so I'm just going to, there's 15 of them. I'm just going to highlight a couple of them. I really love the idea of all of them, but I think number 3 is big: the right to refuse or reject undesired objects, actions, events, or choices. All too often, I notice decisions are being made for this population that, like, have we asked them? You know, I like to give the example of, excuse me, I was in a classroom and the kids came in from recess, and they just kind of put apple juice in front of a student, and he took it and chucked it. He threw it, and so he got in trouble, right? But I said, well, why is he in trouble? Well, you can't just throw apple juice. And I was like, well, that's true, but isn't that him saying he doesn't want it? And they're like, oh, well, yeah, but he still can't do that. So I'm like, yeah, just have him clean it up, and, you know, like, offer him something else. Like, the fact that you didn't even offer, you're just forcing apple juice upon him. So that story always sticks in my mind with number 3. There is another one I wanted to say. I can't find it right now. Oh, here it is. Number 14, and this is big with our population, in my opinion, is the right to be addressed directly and not to be spoken for or talked about in the third person while present. Our students are always actively engaged. They're like sponges, and they're soaking things in. And so it's really disrespectful, rude, and inappropriate to talk about them as if they're not there. And lastly, I work with disproportionality quite a bit, and number 15 really rings true to me. It is the right to have clear, meaningful, and culturally and linguistically appropriate communications. I find this story hit me hard. Is this woman was talking about I think it's 15 or 16 American English dialects. And she read Are You My Mother to a group, and, you know, where the bird falls out of the nest and is looking for its mother, and asks, like, the tree, and asked the big machine. And so the woman asked a young girl to like, hey, retell the story, and she retold it in her dialect, as in, say, she said, is you my mama? You ain't my mama. And I started thinking, like, would I have accepted that as a response as a teacher? Right, that because she was retelling the story really, like, sophisticated, because she took it from that English into her English, right? So she was almost code switching, which was truly amazing. And it just got me thinking, like, what would I have done as a teacher? Would I have accepted those responses, or would I have tried to, you know, maybe have a more appropriate, well, in my mind, not true anymore now that I know this, would I have tried to correct the student, or allow the student to have their thought? So let me stop sharing, go back, rinse and repeat here, folks. Whoops, wrong one. All right. I am back, share screen. I know there's another way to do this. I just can't figure it out. I don't want to waste your time trying to figure that out. So that's one piece that I would love for everyone to take out from today. It's just like, you know what? I'm going to share this with as many people as possible. So when we're talking about the law, here's the history of the law. We don't really need to go too much into it. So in 2015, the Every Student Succeeds Act did change the alternate assessment to that 1%. And here's the Every Student Succeeds Act. I believe you guys will get a copy of this presentation if you like. But basically, it provides states the opportunity to have an alternate academic achievement standards that sets a different expectation of performance that differs in complexity from a grade level achievement standard. All right, so where to begin? All right, science is doing a time check. So here's what will happen if your child, and most of you, I'm assuming when you're on it, on this webinar, you might have already gone through this process, but there's a process in ECATS where there's a question pops up is saying, is the IEP team considering instruction towards the extended content standards? If yes, then you have to complete a worksheet. And that worksheet talks about the cognitive and limited adaptive behavior skills. As I said, I'm not a school psychologist by trade, so I really can't answer a lot of those specific questions I received around psychological tools for this identification piece. We do have a school psychologist consultant. Her name is Lynn McCor, LYNNMAKOR. That's her lane. I can't swim in that lane. So I've seen a couple of that. And then it talks about instructional considerations. And then it talks about post-school outcomes, assessment participation. So here it is. Here's the tip sheet. It's online, and I'll show you where it is online. Here's the thing with the tip sheet, or here's the thing with all those questions, however. They do not all have to be answered yes, right? So it's really that thoughtful consideration around each and every one of those questions that have to be considered, along with the justification, right? Oh, the student doesn't have an IQ that's, plus or minus 3 standard deviations. However, like the reason why, this decision is being made is because academically they're here. There has to be a sound rationale is kind of what I'm trying to say. All right, there's a question. So the first question, I'm sorry, Jasmine, I can't really talk about the Vineland because I'm not proficient with it. Another question is, what percentage of kids who once enrolled in the ECS have returned to regular curriculum? I don't have that data right in front of me. We did recently do a 1% monitoring effort, and we did find a lot of students. A lot is just a term. So I don't have the number, but we did find some students who we asked the IEP team to look back at it. Somebody loved the addition to ECATS. I'm just a question for later. All right. So a couple trends that we have seen, and this can be found if you Google Green Book and on the NCDPI webpage, is you can follow the numbers of students taking the Extend 1 through since, I believe it goes back 5 years. And what you'll find is a common data trend is if you follow the same cohort between 8th and 10th grade. So for every grade level, give or take, we have about 1,000 to 1,100 students taking the Extend 1. Except when we get to grade 10, those numbers fall a little bit. So a hypothesis that is formulated is that a lot of students move from the extended content standards to the occupational course of study in 8th grade. I'm sorry, from 8th to 9th grade, not in 8th grade, from 8th to 9th grade, because the occupational course of study doesn't exist until high school. It is a very rigorous program, and there's, if you go and look up intellectual disabilities on our webpage, you can find more about the occupational course of study. That's out of my realm, so I can't discuss it too much. but that's the hypothesis. I do urge caution in doing that, though, because it aligns very closely to the standard course of study. So if a student's able to do the standard course of study from 8th to 9th grade, what was keeping them on the extended content standards the rest of the time? Because remember, it's for that minute population. It's supposed to be for the most significant cognitive disabilities, students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. So what are they? Right. So here are the extended content standards. And as I said earlier, they're alternate academic achievement standards. And here's what the law says. In general, alternate achievement standards must be aligned with the state's academic content standards, promote access to the general curriculum, and reflect professional judgment of the highest achievement standards possible. I really love that last part, the highest achievements possible. And so once again, standard course of study for 99%, 1% are considered on the extended content standards. So with the extended content standards, there are those 4 core components. There's science, social studies, ELA, and math. So those 4 subject areas must be taught by an adapted curriculum license. Right? Electives, students can participate in any electives. In high school, there are 2 mandatory electives called health, safety, and independent living, and vocational prep. So there are still graduation requirements to graduate with a certificate. You have to make sure you complete those. And that policy is grad 010. I feel like I'm giving you guys a lot of stuff. Hopefully I'm not going too fast through it. My apologies if I am. Tell me to slow down. All right, let me just check the chat. I see questions for later. Is there data about... all right. So I'll get to that question here in a second. So for English language arts, and all of the extended content standards can be found on this website here. I'll drop that in the chat. And using this site, you can see the alignment between the standard course of study and the extended content standards, because they are, for some subjects, very closely aligned. I can't say that they are closely aligned in mathematics, but time to review those is coming up. So let's just go English language arts, and let's go to 4th grade. 4th grade sound good for everybody? All right. So on the left of the screen, you'll find the standard course of study. On the right, you'll find the extended content standards. So the overall achievement is meant to be close, right? Because we can talk about the different complexity. You can see the adoption year is a year off, right? Adopted, when they're adopted, when they're implemented, is oftentimes a little off. And that's because they used to be done in separate settings. Now, thanks to our state board policy manual in terms of reviewing standards, that we're now in the same room, we're at the same tables, we're having these rich discussions, and that happened for science. So I'm really excited about that for science. Sorry guys, I'm gonna have to stop sharing real quick. Amy, what am I doing wrong?
Oh, I'm not your tech girl. I'm always just finding my way and winging it.
Right. Okay, so so for the English language arts, what I really like is we do have some supports out there. And one of those supports is, let me go to this here, support tools. And here's all the information that we discussed today. I'll go through this. Let's go through this really quick. So here's that ECATS. Here's a video if you want to hear me talk about it. I tried to talk in a monotone, boring voice. I'm sorry about that. Here's our guidance flowcharts. Here's our graduation policy. And all students have to be enrolled in courses. So there's that. But for our ELA supports, we have things called learning progressions. What those learning progressions are is they're entry points for all of our extended content standards for ELA. And so let's go to that grade 4. So let me click on that. And all these are accessible for you guys. This isn't just for teachers or professionals. This is for everyone. And so what a team of students did was a team of professionals came in, looked at the standards, and went from the engagement point to the mastery point. Right. So suppose your student suppose your child is able to attend to text, but maybe is having some difficulty identifying, pointing out details from the story. Right. Well, your child's in 4th grade. They should not be using 3rd, 2nd, 1st, or kindergarten standards. They should be using grade aligned standards, but this gives them the entry points to say, you know what, this is where we're going to engage your child in ELA in terms of reading literature 4.1. And so, like I said, those are for all of them. Let's see a kind of a meatier one. So here's identify the theme of a familiar story, drama, or poem. Right. And sometimes I get like a snarky question like, well, why do our students have standards? And this is why I love the law, is because it holds everyone accountable, because everyone can learn. Right. That's why I love the Extend 1. It means our students count. Right. Before, when they weren't assessed, like people weren't really doing much. They were just kind of quality of life, like loving your child too much, right? And so now, now there's things out there for them to do. There's high expectations, and just going through our belief system is every student can achieve these through modifications and accommodations at times. But suppose we want your child to identify the theme of a familiar story or poem. These are kind of the steps to get them there. Right. And these steps, remember the 3 things our students often need more of are more time, right? More opportunities, and a communication system. And so maybe your child can identify the setting, but is having a problem with plot, right? The problem with the story. Well, then, like, oh, let's hit that entry point there. So I really love these learning progressions. I think when people find out about them, they really utilize them. And so once again, let me stop sharing, and I'll answer a question I received quite a bit. And one of those questions is about a one-on-one assistant. And I do have to throw the caveat, I do not know any of the children, so I'm not an active member of an IEP team. So I really have a hard time making that suggestion at all. However, just know that a one-on-one assistant is considered the most restrictive environment for your child. And so that's about all I can really say without knowing anything else, is just be aware that the one-on-one is considered the most restrictive environment. Here's a wonderful website, and it's called Shared Tar Heel Reader. And these are modified stories for specifically done by the people at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, who have done wonderful work. There's a Tar Heel Reader and there's a Shared Tar Heel Reader. What I like about Shared Tar Heel Reader is, let's talk about Frog and Toad's Lost Button, right? It has core words at the bottom. So I don't know if you guys can hear this.
Not.
Did you hear that? Okay. Yeah. So if a student sees something, they can touch something, especially if they have a touch screen like I do right now. Right. And I love Shared Tar Heel Reader. The people at UNC Chapel Hill have done just a phenomenal job with the resources. But Frog and Toad Lost the Button. I actually know the person who wrote this, Claire Greer, who is a pioneer in our field. They went for a long walk, and then you can, say, hey, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this page. And this kind of a quick fun thing. When you're reading a book with your child, don't ask them a bunch of WH questions. Like, stop, right? Let them enjoy and love the idea of reading, right? Share it with them. It's not meant to be a time of like, hey, I'm going to read a page and ask you 5 questions. All right. I think that's an instructional strategy that needs to go away. And you're like, oh, Matt, well, that's in their IEPs is to answer WH questions. yes, you can have that as an IEP goal, most definitely. However, oftentimes kids, like, you forget about why you're reading a book because you're asking too many questions on the first page, right? And so definitely try to engage with your child, and it's called shared reading, where like, oh, look, I see a tree. Do you see anything you like in this picture? And you might learn some really fascinating things, like their ability to like see something you may not have seen in that picture. And so it's just called shared reading. It's a wonderful time just to engage and have the love of reading with your child. Oftentimes I think we ask way too many questions rather than engage, but that's called Shared Tar Heel Reader. I'll open it again and I'll throw that link in the chat.
And Matthew, that's a free resource that anybody can access?
Yes, ma'am. Everything I give you is free dollars.
Good. We like that price.
Yeah, free dollars. And so Shared Tar Heel Reader is just a great resource. Once again, here's our mathematics. We do have mathematics extended content standards. You go to the same site and they're down here. What I love about what we've done with math is if we go to those supporting tools, I'll throw the supporting tools link in here. So I'll just link every for you. Is for math, we have supporting documents for math as well. And what those look like is this. Somebody give me a grade level to look at, so it's not just me dictating everything. Someone throw a grade level in the chat. All right, 6th grade. All right, so let's go to 6th grade. You guys can access these as well. I just saw 6th first. And so you click on here, and here's what it looks like. But what I love about this is, especially for the teacher sense, is it kind of gives them a year that they can do. It talks about a Frere model. Well, what a Frere model is, is you can do it virtually, or you can have a piece of paper. You have the definition in the, or I'm sorry, you have your word in the middle. So in this case, you're talking about unit fractions. You have the definition up top. You have characteristics in the top right, and you have examples in the bottom left, and you have non-examples in the bottom right. And this has been a tried and true manner of teaching students essential vocabulary in general, right? And so notice I didn't say keywords, right? Keywords are different and shouldn't be used in math. Like, oh, like more always means plus. That's not true. So I would encourage like forming a dictionary with your child, and you can use these in anything. There is a link here on the supporting document that tells you how to do it. For a lot of our students, like, well, Matt, they may not have the ability right now to write everything down. Well, nothing's telling you can't print it out and have them like select the definition and then place it on like a piece of paper, right? But so for grade 6, here's what the mastery of the standard looks like. Here's what we're asking them to know. Here's the essential math vocabulary. And then what I really love is here's some activities. And then here is a possible assessment. And I love the activities because it provides like people like, here's what you can do, right? And so it talks about exploring and how you can look at ratios and right away people are like, ratios? Why does my child need to learn ratios? Well, let's take us back to the very beginning about belief systems. All children are entitled to a free and appropriate public education. And in this case, like it happens to be the grade level standard of ratios. And so it gives you a lot of activities you can do. And then, but most importantly, I like this part as well, is there's assessments here. And these have not been created by psychometricians. But these are what educators have come up with. And so let's look at the first one. So create a ratio of 3 squares to 1 triangle. So this one's a little bit more complex because you're going to have to, copy and paste. So here's 3 squares to 1 triangle. So here's your 3-to-1 ratio right there. Well, no, now it's 3-to-1 ratios. But as you can see, that not all of them are like that. So this is what is the ratio between fish and birds. 3 fish to 2 birds. That's what I really like about it. We had a team come together and create these, and I feel like they did a really robust job in terms of creation. Another great free website for math is Didax Free Manipulatives. So once again, what's the price? $3. My voice always goes high when I say $3 because it's like excitement. But it has all of these virtual manipulatives. So a lot of students love and don't get to use these enough. These are just kind of balance squares. So if you put 6 on, how do we make that equal? Using 2 of them, well, let's see, if we put 2 and 4, this way it's equal. If we put it like 4 and 9, you can see that that's not level. So the students learn the idea of equality. So that's a free resource, Didax. It's in the chat. I wanted to give you some resources along with some knowledge. For math, there is Learning Trajectories, which is a free website, which I encourage you to go to. You just have to sign in. But it provides some really robust math concepts. And I'm not sure all teachers know about this. So it might be, a good time to share with your child's teacher. And I love subitizing. Subitizing is the ability to instantly recognize a number. So like if you roll a die and know there's 3, you're subitizing. That's a skill that oftentimes is overlooked for all of our students. So we have similar for science. Science is receiving new standards starting next school year. And so I'm not going to waste your time with that because we are going to have supporting documents for that as well, very similar to the math. And then we also have social studies. And for social studies, those are high school courses. And the unpacking documents that the standard course of study did were extremely robust. And since social studies is actually really aligned, that's where you'll find the social studies. And then there's a presentation, and here's the resources. So that talks about the social studies. Right. Once again, here are the unpacking documents for social studies. The social studies standard course of study team did an amazing job with those. All right, there's our resource page. All right, do I have any questions? I know we're kind of running. I know you guys have had a long day. I appreciate you sticking with us. Well, we'll talk about assessment next. And so students being instructed towards the extended content standards have to take an assessment, and which I personally am a big fan of because it means their students count. I think that's wonderful. So you can see grades 3 and 4, it's ELA and math. And then in 5th grade, they include science. 6th and 7th, ELA and math. 8th grade includes science. So this follows very much the standard course of study. Where it differs a little bit is in high school. The ACT, the alternate for the ACT remains the same. ELA, reading, math, and science, or ELA, reading/reading. But in grade 10, our students are given the English 2, Math 1, and biology. So that's why I showed you guys those supporting documents, is if our students aren't being instructed towards these areas, how are they supposed to take an assessment on it? So there's a couple questions. All right. One is there a way to compel school administrators to stop making IEP decisions 4 to 5 months ahead of time? Well, all parents are given the Parents' Rights Handbook. And in that handbook clearly describes and explains your rights as a parent. I would encourage you to look through those. And if you feel like you're not being heard or being listened to, there are processes within that manual to follow. I think I missed this. Does the ECS, can the ECS be taught by a general education teacher? So in the guidance that we provide, if a child is learning from the extended content standards, the licensure requirement is a license of adapted curriculum. So I guess the answer to that is it depends, because if a teacher, if they're actively looking for teachers because they don't have one, then the gen ed teacher might be filling in. I mean, there's lots of extenuating circumstances in that question as well. So I can't give you a hard yes, a hard no. In Wake County, they use unique. Okay, so the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction is in charge of standards, right? So what the students are required to learn, the minimum of what. The how is up to school districts. And you'll hear the school districts being referred to two things. PSUs, so that's public school units. They used to be called LEAs, but North Carolina General Assembly changed it to public school units. So, but they're still kind of used interchangeably. And so so the PSUs are in charge of the how, and that how is curriculum. And so unique learning systems is the curriculum that Wake County is choosing to utilize. I believe, and according to your question, it's being used in your classroom. So that's a question to really ask Wake County. I'm not allowed to comment positive, negative, or indifference around curriculum, because we're not allowed to. I would you can go to Unique site. I've used it. I know a little bit about it, but I know they've changed it in the years that I've been here.
Matt,
I do want to
real quick, I'm just going to let the attendees know I am going to launch a poll. Anybody that's hung out with us before knows this is something we always do. We have to do because our funders require us to collect some data to make sure that the information that we're putting out is relevant, high quality, and useful. So while you're talking, attendees, you should see a poll pop up. And if you don't mind answering that question, as soon as I find the right evaluation, I'm going to launch it. There it is. Okay. Okay. Now you can do your thing.
And I just wanted to call attention to Anastasia put in the chat about the webinar that we did with Josh Barton, and it's posted on our YouTube page. So she put the link in there in case you were interested about that assistive technology webinar.
And thank you for doing that. And the last free resource I'd like to provide is this one, Project Core. Project Core is it okay if I push that over to the side, Amy? The poll?
I'm sorry. Is it moving for you? Are you still seeing it?
Oh, sorry. I couldn't tell. I think we're good.
I moved it. I thought it was just in my way. I didn't realize it was in yours. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I wasn't, it gets weird when you share screens.
Yeah.
Project Core is a wonderful free website that offers all kinds of wonderful things, but it offers free communication boards. And free communication boards look like something like this. So if your child is non-speaking right now, or if your child does have language and you still feel like this could assist, because there's been research that says having access to assistive technology actually it promotes speaking. It doesn't inhibit. That's one of those fallacies. Oh, if my child gets this or AAC device, they won't talk. That's proven to be not true. But there was lots of research done talking about like how many words do we actually use in our English language, and they find that we don't use that many, from geriatric to pediatric. And so what the team did at UNC Chapel Hill with Dr. Karen Erickson, Dr. Penny Hatch, and Dr. Claire Greer is they really embarked on what are your biggest bang for your buck words. And you can find them here at this free site. And these are Project Core. These are Project Core boards. There are other core boards out there. I know a lot of the vendors have them, but these are wonderful for free as well. But what I really love about this site is you're like, all right, Matt, I've got this communication system. And I said system can be a wide range. Like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to use it. Well, they have free professional development. So you click here, and the one I love personally, I believe there's 10 modules, 10 to 12. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, 12. The one I really love is module 3, and that's beginning communicators. And you're like, all right, well, how does it work? Well, you click here, and then you can do it one of 2 ways. You can do it by yourself, or you can get a group and you can facilitate it. And so they have all the facilitated materials here, and they also have that online self-directed module. Like I said, everything is free here. And it's just wonderful, a wonderful free site. Okay. Phew. Hope I didn't talk too much.
It was great information. Very well done. Very engaging as well. I enjoyed all the questions. It's like, you're going to try and stump me.
Yeah, I think that hopefully if you've taken anything away, it's just that belief system, right? Really believe and know that your child can learn, and then make others around you believe that as well, which changing hearts and minds is very difficult at times. And also the communication bill of rights, that to me is paramount. Making sure that your child has those rights, has those 15 rights.
And I just wanted to chime in because I know some folks had some questions, and I was like, oh, be quiet, Amy, be quiet, Amy. To the parent that had inquired about folks making decisions 4 to 5 months before the IEP meeting. I mean, that's the kind of stuff like I'm over here going, what? That shouldn't be happening. I mean, certainly IEP meetings parents should have meaningful participation and are equal partners in that decision making. Yeah, it can get to the point where maybe folks can't reach the consensus and the LEA can make the final decision, but predetermination is not okay and not allowed. So if that's happening, please feel free to call us and we can help you, maybe give you some action steps and some ideas on how to navigate that space. And then the one-on-one question is one that we often get here. And like any answer to almost every special education question, we often tell folks, well, it depends. It's certainly, we got a lot of folks out there that want a one-on-one, but it's not just something that you get because you want one. There really has to be really good data or evidence, if you will, to support that the student needs that level of support. And when you think about one of the core purposes of the IDA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, as far as preparing students for further education, employment, or independent living, sometimes that one-on-one piece can hinder independence. And so, and as Matthew shared, it is often viewed as a more restrictive environment. And there certainly are some students where it is appropriate for them to have that level of assistance. We have some students that maybe don't have a one-on-one assigned to them, but then their IEP will say that they're going to get one-on-one support. Maybe it's transitioning from one activity to the next or through the hallways. But those are things that would be decided by the IEP team. I think where folks get stuck on whether or not it's appropriate. And so that it's going to be individualized depending on that student and also depending on what have we tried. There should be other things, other supplemental aids and services that folks might want to try before they go that route. So it's never an easy yes or an easy no. It's one of those, it depends things, but if you're going to have that conversation with folks, you want to be able to go there with some data to support, say, well, the teacher's telling me that he's requiring constant, hand over hand support, total redirection, has to have somebody with them. Those are the things that you could stand on and say, well, it almost sounds like you're saying that he requires this level of assistance. So it's not sometimes I see in some Facebook groups say, well, North Carolina they don't allow one-on-ones. We don't have a rule for or against it. We just follow what the IDA says, which we got to do what's appropriate. And if the team decides that's appropriate, then it can happen. If they decide it's not, then it's going to be no. But if they say no, they should be able to document, here's why we refused or rejected that because X, Y, and Z. To see if there's anything new in the chat. I think I can end this poll now since I get this window pulled back up where I can see it.
Yes, and somebody did mention about Karen Erickson's book. I can't endorse anything, but it's called the Comprehensive Literacy for All, teaching students, yeah, Comprehensive Literacy for All. It does offer some great instructional opportunities for students, and it's a good read. It's a quick read. Just ensure you're also, like, if you go by this book, make sure you're taking into account that there is the science of reading out there as well, and so making sure that her book corresponds with the science of reading and the way North Carolina is teaching reading is very important as well. But wonderful book. Dr. Karen Erickson has been just a true trailblazer in our field, and I always love listening to her speak. She's very inspirational.
I was thinking about the question about can the gen ed teacher teach the extended content standards? And it reminded me of an IEP meeting. I think it was one of the first facilitated IEP meetings I ever attended. And it was a lovely family and it was a lovely IEP team. And the IEP team, everybody was in agreement, the family and the school folks, that the students should be on the extended content standards. The problem is that the family absolutely loved the gen ed teacher. So they were going, yeah, we want her to be on the content standards, but we want her to stay, with Miss Terry. And that teacher was going, whoa, stop. I'm not qualified I'm not licensed to do that. I don't know how to adapt the curriculum. And so parents didn't understand that. And so it was kind of explained. And I think that if somebody were to call us and ask that question, we would be like, well, is that appropriate that a gen ed teacher would be teaching a curriculum that they're not licensed or highly qualified to do so? That would be ECAC's response. But also, I mean, we know that there's big time school staff shortages. And we know folks are having to fill some spots with long-term subs or, different folks. But if that was if that's happening to somebody, we would maybe say, hey, maybe have a conversation, how's it looking about getting somebody in here that is highly qualified? Is my student actually getting what was written in their IEP? Is compensatory education something that we're going to need to look into? So just throwing that out there.
Yeah, and so this is my last statement, because I know we're running short on time, and thinking back to that least dangerous assumption in the belief system. If you're a parent who's this conversation is coming up, and it should in every annual review, right, towards the extended content standards, I always tell, when I'm doing my training, what is the harm of the student being in the general education, right? What is the harm? And if there isn't any, right, and remember that that's supposed to be a small percentage of students considered to have a significant cognitive disability. If there isn't any harm in having a child in the general education, then by all means, like I said, I don't want to be unemployed, but it would be wonderful if I didn't have a job one day, because all of our students' needs were being met. So that would be just one wonderful question to ask, is what is the harm in having my child in general education?
Yeah, and I think that there's for a lot of those students, that's kind of the culture in some of these schools, is like you're in that extended content classroom and then they're not getting all these opportunities with their non-disabled peers. And that is really, really, really frustrating for me, because I mean, the research is out there too, that it's not only beneficial for that student, but also for the non-disabled peers to have that time together. So certainly that is something that we tell families, like, they might need to get their core instruction on these subjects from this teacher, but that doesn't mean they don't get to go to art or recess or gym, or maybe have lunch with their non-disabled peers, have that conversation with folks. So, well, I know we only have 1 minute left. Matthew, thank you for this information. It was very, very, very helpful. Thank you, everybody that hung out with us. till 8:30 on a Tuesday night. We are going to send out a follow-up email to folks. We're going to put all the links that Matthew included in the chat. We're going to include these slides. We'll include the recording. And certainly if you have questions, please reach out to us. Matthew, I don't know if families reach out to you directly or if they can or not, but you're
Yes,
a great resource. So
of course, yeah, I can listen and I can make recommendations before anyone reaches out to me. Usually my advice is have you spoken to your IEP team? Have you talked to your building principal, and have you talked to your EC director?
yep.
Those are the big three
That is good advice. We always, kind of go through the chain of command, or if you will, and start there. And hopefully folks are going to reach out to you about maybe some IEP drama, but maybe more to reach out and say, tell me, there was a website or something that you mentioned, or, kind of
right.
thing. Or maybe
Yeah,
they're going to
and
reach out to you and say, hey, we want you to come talk to our group. So
of course, and honestly, thank you for what you guys do. It was an honor for me to come present here, so thank you.
thank you. Thank you. We are so glad to have had you tonight. Thanks everybody that joined us. Look for that follow-up email. Hopefully it'll come out tomorrow afternoon. And everybody have a good night. Take care and go get a late dinner or go to bed.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.